And joining us now via Skype from London is Milo Yiannopoulos himself. Welcome to the show, Milo. Great to see you.
Thank you so much. Lovely to see you again. How are you?
I'm fine, and I want to tell you how amazed I am by the last few days. The fact that Je suis Milo was the #1 trending topic in many countries. I didn't know that support for freedom of speech, or at least for your freedom of speech, was so wide and deep. Were you surprised by it?
No, because I know I'm very popular and people very kind and very nice, and I do have like a big fan base, and they're lovely to me. But here's something you should take heart from. You know, we really have a serious and large body of people who sincerely believe in freedom of speech now. They don't like being policed, and these people are very often disaffected liberals too. The sort of progressive establishment that wants to police people's language about sex, about race, about all this, the other kind of stuff, really now is in a tiny minority. And they might be a powerful minority, but they are a minuscule minority when you consider the enormous strength of support. I trended globally, #3 globally trending topic. I was the #1 trending topic in the UK, the US, Canada, and Germany. This was an enormous outpouring of support for freedom of speech, and not just for freedom of speech, but for the right to offend, for the right to be mischievous and dissident, and for the right to needle and poke and provoke the pearl clutchers and hand wringers. I'm a person who doesn't just make unpopular arguments, but I do it in a deliberately provocative way, and people wanted to support me anyway. And I think we should, as conservatives and libertarians, we should take huge comfort from that.
I do, and it's impressive to me. And you remind me of, if I may say so, the fight I had with the Human Rights Commission in Alberta almost 10 years ago, where deliberately saying, no, I'm not going to back down, I'm not going to apologize, I'm not going to try and be reasonable. I insist on the right to be offensive when I so choose, because I don't want to grant others the right to restrict me. I mean, that's an absolutist approach to being offensive that's very rare out there. And I think it's one of the reasons that you've had so much support, is that you're not cowering as so many people do.
I think that's right. I mean, I think everybody by now has seen your great opening statement during that sort of horrible show trial. It's one of the sort of iconic free speech videos on the internet. It's certainly something that I'd love to return to. And just, when I'm feeling a bit sort of low and I'm thinking, oh, maybe these guys have got a point, I go back and watch your speech and I'm fired up to go and be offensive again. And appreciating that the value of being offensive, the central importance of being offensive is that it protects us from real world violence. There's, of course, no such thing as violent speech. There are violent actions, and speech that is passionate and engaged and sometimes provocative and offensive is what stops us from shooting one another. And your opening speech in that ridiculous show trial is probably the best example of a sort of great passionate defense of that argument, and I love it. This has been another global example. My recent trending chaos has been another global example of just how important many people find free speech, particularly when they realize what the consequences of losing it are. And let's remember just how remarkable this outpouring was. I didn't get my account deleted. All Twitter did to me was remove the verified status, because it was so brazenly and preposterously political, because they were using a tool designed to confirm the identity of public figures and media personalities to sort of punish people for ideological infractions. Users went nuts. Twitter's shareholders are going to be asking themselves, given the stagnant growth in user numbers, given the fact that Twitter's share price is now at its lowest ever, below $20, shareholders are going to be asking, what are the criteria that Twitter is using, that Twitter support teams and the people in mid and low management who determine these ridiculous abuse and harassment policies, which have been expanded to include ridicule and disagreement. Shareholders are going to want to know, what are these policies? Because these policies are significantly damaging the prospects of this company. They're damaging the prospects of this company by denying the vast majority of users the right to speak and express themselves how they choose to. And this is one of those wonderful moments when, free speech warriors like you and me get a little glimpse into the heart of the public, and we get a little moment of contact with them, and we realize that actually it's not just us. Most people agree with us, not with the censors, not with the hand-wringers, not with the pearl clutchers, not with the fainting couch feminists, but in fact most people are on the side of those who fight for the right to be provocative, interesting, robust, and yes, sometimes offensive. It's such an important battle, and I think, as I said earlier, we should all take heart from what we've seen.
I think you're so right. I mean, who would want to be part of an information source that is deliberately weeding out the most interesting, most funny, most controversial? But of course, it's only one-sided. I mean, there are extremely crude and offensive comedians, some of whom I follow just for entertainment or just to know what's going on the center or on the left. It seems to be that the censorship tips only one way. There's anti-Semitism. It's something I follow, is radical Islam and Jews in the West. Anti-Semitism is ubiquitous on Twitter, and I don't call for censorship of it, but the accusation of Islamophobia leads to people being shut down all the time. It's only one way. If you're conservative, if you're worried about radical Islam, those are the folks being censored so far.
Yes, and you only need to look at the decisions Twitter makes because it is notoriously opaque. It refuses to be honest about the criteria for deletions, suspensions, all the rest of it. It is opaque, so the only thing we can do is look at past behavior. And when we do that, we discover that entirely and almost without exception, the people who are suspended, the people who get into trouble, are conservatives. Look at the double standards, right? Look at the sorts of people who are still, for example, allowed to have a verified tick. Convicted rapists, whether it's celebrities like Mike Tyson, or people who have horrible things that alleged at them, like Bill Cosby. Look at the groups who are allowed to speak with impunity on Twitter's network. Feminists who are allowed to tweet "kill all white men." ISIS who are allowed to recruit and market themselves on Twitter almost with impunity. Twitter has to be shamed into acting by hacking groups like Anonymous before it will make moves to censor some of these people. But conservatives, like a gay columnist cracking a joke about feminism, that's cause for censure. I think we know what Twitter's priorities are because it has shown us time and time and time again. It has a long history of brazenly partisan political posturing and maneuvering to discredit, delegitimize, and ridicule conservatives. Yeah. And I think now it's time for the company to be honest with its users, honest with its investors about what its priorities are. If this company has given up on ever trying to make money, the users are flatlining, if not going down, the stock price is tanking. If this company knows it's not going anywhere and is simply going to turn itself into a far left attack vector, we should know that. Journalists should know that. Readers should know that. And its own investors should know that. Yeah, what's interesting is, and when I knew that you were a serious phenomenon, I enjoy your audacity, your sense of humor. I support so much of your politics. But this left just the sphere of politics and social justice wars. When I saw a high-level Silicon Valley investor, Marc Andreessen, I think is how you pronounce his last name, like a serious tech guy, when he started talking about this, when CNN Money did a story about this, when BuzzFeed, which is a left-wing website, wrote a fairly neutral and objective treatment of you, I thought, wow, this is moving outside just politics, because if you can censor someone in an opaque way for politics today, it could be anyone tomorrow. Do you think that there are some actual shareholders or directors of Twitter who are talking to their boss, Jack, and saying, look, if you lose your reputation for free speech, that's the lifeblood of the internet, you will cause economic harm. Do you think there's voices like that Silicon Valley boss actually talking to the top decision makers at Twitter? Well, what's interesting is the previous CEO, Dick Costolo, had a really good record on free speech. And of course, one of the reasons that it suggested he was ousted is he had too bad a record on effectively censoring conservatives. Now, Jack Dorsey, told Nick Bilton for his book Hatching Twitter that he wanted Twitter effectively to be considered almost like a utility. He wanted Twitter to be like running water. Well, I don't remember the last time the water company came to me and shut my service off or started giving me a less good quality service because I had the wrong opinions. This is not how you run a utility. Now, some conservatives will be uncomfortable about the idea of Twitter being being regulated as it were a utility. They think that this speech should be left to the public, to the private sector. But we have to consider, even as robust conservatives, whether that's actually working. Aaron Swartz, the late founder of Reddit, said that censorship, which normally only has a meaning in a political context, may be pertinent in new technology companies that have vast platforms that monopolize certain kinds of speech and which create new public squares that nobody else can really get into. Now, Twitter has such gigantic purchase on the media, on what stories are covered and how they're covered, that it has a significant impact on our democracy and on our public debate. If Jack Dorsey, whose tenure at Twitter has been marked only by excessive policing of conservatives and by a nosediving stock price, is determined to prioritize the needs of rich white feminists and Black Lives Matter protesters over security concerns, over being fair, over being open, being transparent, being reasonable to his own users and honest with them about his priorities. If he cannot do that on his own, I don't know what the solution is. I think what's probably going to happen is not government regulation, but simply that Twitter will fail. Many people think that the company is already past its best. It will never recover. Its stocks will never recover. Its reputation will never recover. And just let's remember, there's a really important thing from this, is the bipartisan nature of the criticism that has happened as a result of my, circus, effectively, from this petty thing they did to me. It has been support from all sides, from comedians, from journalists, people who understand the threat to freedom of expression and to creative freedom from censorship. And the BuzzFeed piece is a good example, but there have been others too. This is breaking out as a really serious issue, and people are now asking, has Twitter had its day? People are saying, with the stock price tanking, users alienated, and all of these questions around who is allowed to make jokes on the platform, since they've now delegitimized a gay satirist, like, where is this going to end? Who is going to be next? Everyone is asking, will it be me? And those are the conditions under which social networks falter and fail. We've seen it before. There's no reason to suppose Twitter will be any different. When you start aggressively policing platforms with anonymity, it has never worked in the past. You can do it on Facebook when you tie identities to when you tie names to real-world identities in a much more concrete, sort of anchored way. But in a platform like Twitter, where anybody can call themselves anything and sign up for dozens of accounts, policing language like this has never worked, can never work. It is technologically impossible. It is immoral, and it is going to be the death of the platform if they don't fix it.
You're on fire today, my friend. I'm very generous for your time. I do have one last question for you. And,
sure.
And this was a strange attack on you. As you mentioned, Twitter took off your little blue check mark that says verified, which is...
They did. I feel like a member of the proletariat now.
It's bizarre because, that's really an identity verification tool, that this is the real Milo and other accounts are not. So it's so weird that you've been unpersoned, to use an Orwellian phrase. But let me throw another scenario at you, because this was a gentle slap at you. You were still able to marshal this counterattack so successfully. Yes. But let me throw something at you. What would have happened if they would have deleted your account like they did to a guy named Charles Johnson? What would have happened if Google would delete your YouTube account? What if Facebook would suspend you there? Because the presidents or chief executives of all three of those companies, YouTube, which is owned by Google, Facebook, and Twitter, all have announced in the last month that they are going to bring more policing. In Germany, all three of them have been compelled by Angela Merkel to do more policing. So you were able to fight back because you were only slapped, not crushed, so to speak. Yes. What happens if you were just unpersoned completely? If Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter said there is no more Milo, how do we fight back then?
Well, you can't, in a way. Conservatives haven't traditionally been very good at building their own platforms. We certainly haven't had much of an example of that happening yet. I always hear about people who say they're going to do it, and these platforms never get the purchase that we're hoping. Twitter was smart in a way. It knew, if you look at the outcry, this has been a gigantic, huge thing going on for days. One of the reasons I haven't shaved for your show, I'm so sorry. I've had no time to do anything else. They were very smart in a way. By doing this, they hoped to sidestep the controversy. They hoped that, and they did it on a Friday night, of course, so they hoped that it would all blow over by Monday. It hasn't all blown over by Monday. It's still continuing to get worse for them. I think that they thought that just by taking my blue tick away, they'd be able to sort of ride it out. That's not what's happening. imagine how much worse it would have been if they had banned me. I think the conservative media would be in an uproar. There would be an outright revolt. I don't think any of these companies have the balls to do that. I said to Charles Johnson at the time, I think that banning me would be different from banning him, because I think I'm more likable, and people don't mind coming to my defense, whereas he tends to make a lot of enemies wherever he goes with what is unquestionably some very robust and most of the time rock solid reporting. But he enjoys burning bridges, whereas I quite like to build them. So I think that's part of why they've approached us differently. But also just, the sheer scale of my sort of fans and following made it politically impossible for them to do that. I guess they're waiting for me to say something so outrageous that nobody could reasonably disagree with me being banned. But they're the sort of statements that, of course, I never make, and I haven't made, and don't deserve to have had my status revoked over already. If, conservatives and libertarians, and it's particularly this new cultural libertarian movement who want to crack jokes. They're defined by mischief and irreverence, these cultural libertarians. I think that you're one. I'm one. You've got people like Gavin McInnes, Christina Hoff Sommers, Dave Rubin, Lauren Southern from your network. These people who like to be mischievous and irreverent, they're the people that really get under the skin of the progressive elites. And they're the people who are going to start, I think, to disappear from these platforms over the next couple of years. When that happens, when the first person goes, when the first one of us with significant sort of clout and weight and institutional backing behind us gets wiped out, I think that's the time for us all to draw a line in the sand and say, no more, we're leaving. And I don't know when that's going to be, and I don't know who it's going to be, but it is coming. They're going to try it, and when they try it, I hope that we can get a similar response from the public that I've had this weekend. No more, enough. If you continue to do this to people that we want to listen to, who are not doing any harm, they're not abusing people, they're not harassing people, they are merely expressing themselves, with deploying criticism and ridicule, essential tools of democratic discourse. If you continue to do this to the people that we respect and like, we will leave. And the worst thing that any of these platforms could do would be to ban somebody like you or somebody like me, because it will be the biggest nail thus far in their coffins, and it will trigger a mass user exodus.
Milo Yiannopoulos, you're very generous with your time. Keep up the fight for freedom. I think right now you are the leading spokesman for the right to free speech and against the counterfeit right not to be offended. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.